Selamat pagi, selamat siang, good morning. My name is Landry Subianto. I'm a former Indonesian diplomat and now working in the private sector. And most importantly, I am a proud citizen of ASEAN. And in this session, we are going to embark on a very important efforts and work of FPCI and AREA. That is the survey on ASEAN people's perception towards, on China, India, Japan, and the USA. Living among giants. That's a big title for this survey. So I think this is very interesting, very significant for you and for us all. And for that purpose, I think first of all, I would like to invite Mr. Tetsuya Watanabe, President of AREA, to deliver his opening remarks. Watanabe Sensei, どうぞよろしく。よろしくお願いいたします。どうぞ。
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. Dr. Dino Patijare, founder and chairman of FPCI, distinguished speakers, participants, and ladies and gentlemen, and young colleagues. It's very honor and privilege for AREA and myself to be here today at the conference on Indonesian foreign policy. This year's theme, from non-alignment to creative alignment, perfectly captures the need for Indonesian foreign policy to adapt to the evolving global landscape and the emerging challenges of the 21st century. ASEAN, located at a crossroad between two major seas that are expected to be the epicenters of global economy and politics in the 21st century, Indian and Pacific Oceans. ASEAN cannot escape the ripples and influence of the changing geopolitical dynamics. ASEAN needs to navigate the changing geopolitical dynamics of the century. In the meantime, there are very limited studies which seriously look at ASEAN's people's voices and perspectives. Against this background, this year's survey of ASEAN people's perspectives on China, India, Japan, and the USA aims to capture the views and attitudes of people in ASEAN from different walks of life towards four important countries: China, India, Japan, and the United States of America. The survey hopes to gauge people's opinions on their country and ASEAN's relationships with the four selected countries in different sectors, from economic, social culture, and political security. It also seeks to understand the assessment of the people of ASEAN toward the multiple cooperation initiatives proposed by these external partners. AREA is a policy think tank, international organization located here in Jakarta, serving for ASEAN and East Asia, is very proud to engage with the people in ASEAN and support FPCI in conducting this survey. This collaboration marks a deepening of AREA's participation with FPCI, partnerships with FPCI, and engagement with the people in ASEAN. We look forward to continuing our cooperation and engagement in these challenging, uncertain times. We hope that the finding of this survey will serve as a valuable resource for stakeholders, industries, government leaders, civil society, and beyond. We also envision that the survey results will contribute designing the foreign policy of ASEAN governments Indonesia, and dialogue partners. I very much look forward to listening to today's discussion. Thank you very much for your attention. Terima kasih.
Thank you, Watanabe Sensei. どうもありがとうございました。And I think, thank you again, Watanabe Sensei. Before we embark on the discussion on the result and findings of the survey, may I invite now my good friend, Dr. Sofwan, to the stage and perhaps to share with everybody the result of the findings of our survey. Please, Pak Sofwan, good to see you. Good to see you always. Please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Landry, and thank you very much for Watanabe Sensei, and also for all FPCI team and everyone who is coming here. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, salam sejahtera untuk kita semua. It is great to be here to share some sneak peek of our most recent survey. I have to disappoint you because this is not electoral survey, not electability survey. Many people are now waiting for electability survey, especially at the day when presidential candidates are giving speech in the same room. But we are not doing electability survey. We are, although it's quite similar, we are doing a survey on the perceptions of the peoples of ASEAN towards four important countries that we see play an important role in shaping the region: China, United States of America, Japan, and India. So let me start with this. Southeast Asia is the region that is expected to be among the epicenters of global politics in the 21st century. It is in the middle, in the center of the Indo-Pacific region, where great powers set their sight for this century. We are located between the two strategic oceans, the Indian Oceans and Pacific Oceans, and is an important trade route, an important energy route, and thus the role of Southeast Asia is increasingly becoming important. But at the same time, because of the rising importance of Southeast Asia, of course, a lot of interest from a lot of people, including from great powers inside and outside the region. Depends on how you define the region. However, when we are talking about the international politics in Southeast Asia, we tend to see states as monolithical entities. We think that Indonesia will do this and that. Indonesia sees China as this and that. China sees Southeast Asians and as this and that, etc. There is very limited studies. There are some surveys, like our fellows in Institute for Southeast Asian Studies in Singapore has been conducting quite regularly the State of Southeast Asia survey. But there is a very limited discussion, very limited survey that looks at the perceptions of Southeast Asian people, of ASEAN people, towards their relationship with a lot of countries, especially with these four important countries. So in this survey, we try to capture the complexity of the perceptions of the ASEAN people. So we sent a survey to all 11 ASEAN countries. We include Timor-Leste this year, although Timor-Leste is not officially in ASEAN yet, but it is already accepted in principle. So we include also Timor-Leste. We successfully received 1,722 responses, which is distributed among 5 categories: 2 big categories of elites and students. We put students in the survey as well as one of the uniqueness of this survey, because we see student perspective is important because they are going to be the shapers of the future. But we combine them and compare them then with the elites survey, which is composed of 4 categories: the academia, government officials, business sector, and civil society. Let's move. So based on the result of the survey, we found several interesting things. The complete result, you can later check it, but let us look at some sneak peek, which I think is among the most important result of the survey. So these are the number of respondents. We got 1,722 respondents from 11 ASEAN countries. There is 5 categories of respondents, 35 questions if we exclude respondents' identity. Indonesia is the highest, but we see that the proportion is still reasonable. And we got significant responses from all countries and categories. Let's move. So this is among the main result. So first, Japan is generally perceived as the most favorable. This is not a surprise actually. Watanabe Sensei. いいですね. いいですね. Yeah, so it's quite consistent with the other surveys looking at different perceptions towards different countries. It is number 1 in the most trustworthy, most dependable, most respectable and credible partner, most compliant with international law, most consistent supporter of ASEAN centrality, most loyal partner in supporting ASEAN's initiative and mechanism, and most aligned with ASEAN's principles. However, it is interesting that while Japan is seen as the most favorable partner, when the respondents are asked who is the most relevant partner for the future, it is not Japan, it is China. So Japan is the most favorable with a lot of positive attributes that is answered by the respondents. But when asked about who is the most important partner for the future, it is not Japan, it is China. This is interesting because then this creates a kind of paradox or dilemma. It is answered as the most relevant partner for ASEAN's future, and it is also considered by a respondent as the most reliable partner for economic cooperation. But at the same time, it's also the country which draws the most concern. So it is interesting. I mean, it is most important, it is recognized as the most important for the future, but people are also anxious. People are also worried about China. It is it is number 1 in the answer on most reluctant to cooperate, the biggest hegemonic ambitions, the most detrimental strategic ambitions in Southeast Asia, most likely to use tools for political objectives in relations with ASEAN member states, etc. So a lot of concerns towards China. So it creates a very interesting picture there. India, on the other hand, is quite invisible, despite a lot of Bollywood dance in our televisions. It is generally perceived positively and relatively non-threatening, but it's quite invisible in different parts of the survey. USA is quite unique. It comes often as the second. When we are talking about concerns on security, on intervention, US is quite high, but is still number 2 below China. This, for example, in the least trustworthy, in having the biggest hegemonic ambition, the most detrimental strategic ambition. The United States is consistently number 2 after China. But there is one category in which US is number 1, which is the most likely partner to politically interfere in ASEAN member countries' affairs. This is probably because of the historical memory in Indonesia, in Philippines probably, and in some other, Vietnam, Cambodia. Yeah, Kissinger passed away a few days ago, so maybe people still think that way. So that's the general views that we can take about the countries. Now we can also look at more specific aspects of cooperation. On China, the most satisfactory relations is in education, research. It's a soft aspect of the relations, the cultural aspects of it. Investment, trade, infrastructure development, and digital economy. So apart from education, which is socio-cultural, others are economy, and this is consistent with the view on the importance of China in the economy of Southeast Asian countries. Again, consistent with the high concern on China, especially in the political and security aspects, the least satisfactory cooperation is on defense and security, cyber security, maritime affairs, transnational crimes, and immigration and borders. So the breakdown in each country is quite consistent with the result of the general view towards the country. Let's move. India, also, you can see the details. Let's move to, because I only have 2 more minutes. Let's skip then to Japan and USA. I think it's quite consistent with the result of the survey. What I would like to show again is when asked about the significance of the country which has most significant influence in different aspects of ASEAN community pillars, political security, economic, and socio-cultural, we see that 3 major countries are having their own arenas. For example, China is, the USA is perceived as the most significant influence in political and security, while China is in economic and Japan is in the socio-cultural. So they have their own powers, their own advantages. Later, we also look at how ASEAN people perceive different initiatives. And we found that Belt and Road Initiative is the most popular and it's most familiar. 84% of the respondents answer that they already heard the Belt and Road Initiative. The official development assistance by Japan is number 2. ASEAN-Japan Integration Fund is number 3. And Indo-Pacific Strategy is number 4. The initiative that is less known is the India's Act policy and China Global Civilization Initiative. I saw the Chinese embassy booth outside, so you need to promote more because the GCI is still 57% never heard of. Let's move. And not only known, but and in general, these initiatives are generally seen positively. Let's move. This is also an interesting point. The satisfaction rate towards ASEAN's role in many important issues, from Myanmar to Rohingya to negotiation in the South China Sea, is quite low. So many of the respondents are in the not satisfied spectrum. And the not satisfied is larger than even somewhat not satisfied. Next, about AUKUS and Quad. It's quite interesting picture that AUKUS is relatively seen more negatively than the Quad. So 32% says that AUKUS will undermine the stability in the region, while 21% say that AUKUS will strengthen the stability in the region. Compared with Quad, the Quad respondents answer that 24% respondents answer that the Quad will undermine the stability of the region, but the Quad is seen more positively, 25%, so not really significant, but still higher, that Quad will strengthen the stability of the region. while people who say that they have no opinion is the largest one. Let's move. I think this is the last. People are also asked about their comments on the increased NATO activities in the region. In general, it's quite negative. Only 25% welcomes the increase of NATO's activities in the region. Almost half, 42%, rejects the increase of NATO activities. Quite similar picture in the establishment of NATO office, although it is more neutral. NATO office in the Japan. So office can open, but no more activities. So what is the point of the office? Okay, so then that are some sneak peek of the results of the survey. If you are interested, you can check our website, the ASEAN People Perception Survey. The full report will be available next week, but some snapshots of it is available now on the website. So please check it and look at that and give your comments. And looking forward for the feedback. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sofwan Albana, for your excellent presentation. And I'm sure that everyone here is looking forward to receiving the final product of the final outcomes of the report. And this survey is very important and very timely, with very interesting results as well, which I would like to explore further in our discussion. And may I now invite all three other distinguished panelists to take their seats on the stage. First, Professor Joseph Liao, Dean of the College of Humanities, Arts and Social Sciences, and Tan Kah Kee, Chair, Professor in Comparative and International Politics, Nanyang Technological University. Welcome to the stage, Professor. And second is Professor Renato Cruz de Castro, my old good friend, Professor, welcome. And he's a distinguished professor at the Department of International Studies, De La Salle Universities in the Philippines. And last but not least, of course, I'd like to invite Dr. Jitipat Punkam, Associate Professor, Faculty of the Political Science, Thammasat University, and my fellow colleague at Oxford University. So welcome and good to see you again, Dr. Jitipat. So gentlemen, unfortunately, as you can see, our panel is gender imbalanced. I hope that it doesn't really mean that we don't care about, female perceptions in the survey, because I believe perhaps some of you even are involved in the survey. But again, I would like to explore some of the findings of the survey with each and every one of you. And as a moderator, may I ask a few questions before I turn, of course, the floor to you all, the most important guests in this session. And in the interest of time, may I remind you to kindly be brief in your response, perhaps 2 or 3 minutes in each questions. And the first questions, the boiling one, is this survey reveals that Japan is at the top of the list of most trusted, credible, and supportive partners for ASEAN, as you mentioned, Dr. Sofwan. But on the other hand, the majority of respondents, with I think around 43%, chose China as least trusted partner, and China is also at the top for the partner for most likely to use economic tools and coercive measures against ASEAN and ASEAN member states. Why might this be the case? And Professor Cruz, if I may invite you to care to respond to this question, please.
Let me first address working.
Yes, I think you need to.
About Japan, I think it's been consistent when you talk about ASEAN countries. Well, we could attribute it for the fact of the success of Japan's Fukuda Doctrine.
Okay.
That Japan will not use force and Japan would be a reliable economic partner. I think we commemorated the Fukuda Doctrine, the 30th anniversary, and this is basically a vindication of the fact that the Fukuda Doctrine has succeeded, that Japan is accepted as a reliable partner, and of course in terms of the fact that it's not so overwhelming. It does not impose. Japan would rather convey to you that message. And of course in the case of the Philippines, this is something that we have valued. The fact that, 6 years ago, we had a president that nearly transformed the Philippines into a province of China. Fortunately, this did not happen, and thankfully it's because of Filipino public opinion. Now, it's basically Japan that is playing now a very active role in ensuring that we enjoy our autonomy, that we won't have to depend on a single dominant economic power that would use its economic state trap against any smaller Southeast Asian country. It's Japan that basically had provided us this opportunity. Now I ask the question, why is this a concern about China? One very simple answer, and that is Chinese maritime expansion in the South China Sea. I have the term we are using right now in the Philippines. It's not any more territorial dispute, it's maritime expansion. And we simply have to look at the national map that China released last September. And you just have to look at the 10-dash line. And of course, this also accounts for the fact that in the Philippines right now, the narrative shifting away from the narrative of the Duterte administration for us to become, the competitor of Cambodia in terms of being friendly to China has been transformed. So that's now the case of the Philippines. I hope I answer your question.
Thank you, Professor Renato. And perhaps, Professor Liu, you would like to throw different color to what has been said? Please.
Good morning, everyone. Let me just make two very quick general comments about the survey first, as I was observing the results. The first is, it's an excellent survey, very useful. It would have been interesting also if you could identify the national positions on all these issues, right? Because it's good to have a sense of ASEAN, but ASEAN is an intergovernmental organization. Yeah? And if you look at the four major powers, they all engage primarily with the individual countries, yeah? Not with ASEAN. ASEAN is secondary for them, individual countries first. So that's the first thing. Second thing, the nature of surveys is there tends to be a time lag. Yeah? So, and this can help answer, for example, the question of why is China seen to be such a consequential partner, even though they are not as reliable or trusted, right? I think a lot of people, when they answer that question, the first thing that comes to their mind is the economic relationship with China, right? And that economic relationship for Southeast Asian countries was built on primarily two very good decades on the back of Chinese low-end manufacturing, which a lot of our countries, either the higher value countries provided service infrastructure for, and the lower value countries provided raw materials for, right? But the Chinese economy, as you know, is changing. In fact, the Chinese economy today is already changing, not necessarily for the better, in my own view. So we have to understand that thinking about the Chinese economy today very often is done based on our understanding of the Chinese economy a few years ago, right? So I think that is something we have to keep in mind.
Thank you, Professor Liu, and thank you also for pointing out to that methodological, aspects of the research about the time lag, etc. Probably that will be a very good input for whoever done this report, right? And of course, now my good friend Kun Thitipat, if you would like to make comments about the first question.
Thank you. Two comments for the survey itself. I think the survey is so excellent and brilliantly and timely address the important issues in the Indo-Pacific right now. So that's my first take. The second one, I think it might need to expand in the future to cover not only the four giants in the region, but also maybe European Union, Russia, and others as well. Australia included, for example. With regard to Japan, ASEAN relation, I think I have no doubt about this, good relationship and Japan as a trustworthy partner in ASEAN. Despite Japan's, historical legacies in the Second World War, Japan has improved its foreign policy direction and policies, being a kind of soft power, economic power, and assistant power which provide international public goods in the region through ODA. And my second point is that I think, I don't think Japan is today and China is tomorrow. But let's see the future survey. I would say that Japan and China will be the tomorrow of ASEAN, of course. Okay, and I think it's true that China is exceeding Japan on some realms, including trade and security. But in terms of investment and sustainable development, Japan remains a big and relevant player and partner of ASEAN. Japan is the most trusted and credible partner because of three factors, at least for me. One, there is no territorial disputes and no assertiveness, military assertiveness of Japan in relations with ASEAN member states. Two, Japan has proven to be a kind of benign and comprehensive strategic partnership throughout these decades following the Second World War. And third, I think Japan and ASEAN, also ASEAN member states, have developed a kind of joint economic development through and through. So I think this is maybe, Japan might be today, but tomorrow will be Japan and China. India is in between, unsure and unclear future. It might be a kind of hybrid power, mixed power in our region. On the other hand, US seem to be in the past thinking from kind of security power without incorporating other forms of power in the region. Thank you.
Thank you for your very brief but powerful explanations about the situations. And perhaps, Pak Sofwan, if you'd like to make comments as well. You know the survey very well.
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you very much for your comments, Professor Liao. First, on the possibility of breaking this down into countries. Actually, we have the data based on the countries. And some parts of the full report will contain that. For example, we compare the views on US and China in countries like Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia are quite different than Philippines. Also on different views towards Quad, AUKUS is quite varied in different ASEAN countries. So there are indeed unique situations in each country, which is pretty much affected by the bilateral context between these specific countries with each of the four countries. However, we do make the report for the general ASEAN first, but if we would like to dig deeper, I think we can. And we will make sure that all of the data, all of the results of the answers of the question that can be broken down into countries will be available in the website. So if you would like to dig and expand for your own research, you can. We did this with the previous surveys as well, so you can check that. And also on the possibility of including other countries, not only the four countries. This was also a debate within ourselves, actually. Why should we put these four countries and not including the others? It's more like a technical issue as well, because with four countries, we have 35 questions and around 20 minutes, 10 to 20 minutes answers, because some of the questions are specific to specific initiatives by that country, as well as some aspects of relationship with that specific country. So if we include another entity like European Union, we'll add like 8 more questions, and that will add more time. And we are testing, we are making some pilot projects of the survey to test how many questions are bearable for the respondents. And we see that 30 to 40 questions are the most ideal one, because we got enough detail, but at the same time, it is not too overwhelming for the respondents. More than that, respondents, the rate of non-completion is high. So they are in the middle of completing that, and then too many questions. You ask too much, yeah? And we don't like to be asked too much, right? So people stop completing the form. So we test that, and we see that 30 to 40 is the ideal balance. The problem is in 30 to 40 questions, you can include only so much. So then we how to then prefer that. So we try to try to decide the four probably most interesting countries to check. So that's why, of course, China, US must be included, Japan must be included. But what is the last one? Maybe India is interesting because we are now increasingly talking about Indo-Pacific. So yeah, so that's what behind the decision of the four countries. It's a combination of substantial but also technical or methodological issues of survey. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Safwan. Now let's move to the biggest giant that we have as dialogue partners, which is China, right? And Dr. Jitipat mentioned just now that it seems to me, or to us, or from the survey, Japan is today and China is the future. But the controversy is that it's the least trusted partners based on the survey. So, Professor Liao, I would like to have your words on why is it like that, or do you believe that with the statement that Japan is today or China is tomorrow? Please, Professor.
I have no crystal ball, so I don't know what the future is. I can understand why people will say China is the future, but the reality, to my mind, if you look at where China is today, you cannot but ask what the future holds for China. Yeah? What I mean is this. If you look at the Chinese economy, and I alluded to it earlier already, the Chinese economy is at a very critical stage now, where it has to go through some structural transformation. Some of it is for political reasons, for sort of nationalist reasons, but some of it is very structural, right? Simply because China wants to move up the value chain. Every country wants to move up the value chain, yeah? And so the question is, how has China decided to do that? The China of today has decided to do that by actually focusing internally, right, with dual circulation, by closing to some extent its economy, simply because the Americans, they're in competition with the Americans, and the Americans are doing that as well. Now, the question is that the best way for the Chinese economy today to make the leap to the next level? Right? I personally think that it would be very challenging for China, because you're talking about an economy that is making it more and more difficult for their private sector to thrive the way it had before. And the private sector has always been the backbone of the Chinese economy, at least over the last 2-3 decades. The current president is taking a very, I think, a bit of an ideological approach to economic policy, and he is doing economic policy, again, very different from China previously, where economic policy was the remit of the Prime Minister and the State Council. Now it is very much the president, very active in trying to dictate economic policy. And this is, again, quite a fundamental change from the Chinese model that we knew before. So my last point will be, I mean, the Chinese economy, don't get me wrong, it still has a lot of strengths, it still has a lot of potential, and in terms of technology, it is very committed to not just moving up the value chain, but overtaking the United States as the top technologically driven economy in the world. The question is whether the policies, the social, political, and economic infrastructure that the country currently has will allow them to achieve these objectives that they have set for themselves. I think we don't know the answer to that yet.
Thank you, Professor. And Professor Renato, if I may, you're the closest neighbor among ASEAN countries, please.
Regarding China, of course, looking at China, why is it there's suspicion regarding China? Historically, if you look at the emergence of great powers, for example, the case of the United States, for example, I like focus on the United States, the superpower. At the onset, of course, the United States indicated that I would allow certain institutions to constrain me. So when the United States was building the world order after the Second World War, it relied primarily on multilateralism, basically John Eikenberry. So in a way, it gained legitimacy. We respect great powers, our professor, what, if that powerful image would show that I am willing to be constrained. I would not exercise power to the utmost. Unfortunately, we don't see this in terms of China. Just to make a specific focus, the South China Sea. China signed the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea. You limit, basically, what you consider your maritime entitlement. Just look at the 10-dash line. And despite the fact that you have, of course, the July 12, 2016 arbitral ruling, which states that what China is doing to the South China Sea does not conform to customary and, of course, the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea. How did China react? China basically ignored the ruling. So again, the point is I'm raising, we would have to judge China as a responsible and, of course, a great power that's willing to be constrained of how it behaves in the South China Sea. Of course, looking at it now, we are, the Philippines is, of course, a lot of suspicion. I would follow again with Joseph. Why do you have this major economic reform that's primarily more of internal? And of course, this was very apparent during the discussion during the 20th Party Congress last year. China's focus would be going into, of course, internal. Let's go back to the 1930s. Let's look at Nazi Germany. When Nazi Germany was planning on embarking on a major expansion, even Japan, it adopted a policy of what you call autarky. If great powers would go into major conflict, it would have to limit exposure to the international economy because it had to be sure it will not be vulnerable. China, of course, has geopolitical ambition. It's not just an economic power, it is also bent. Number one, of course, is the South China Sea. And the other one that we would have to watch for, and this, of course, this also accounts for the Philippines, something that's very close to the Philippines, Taiwan. China, of course, has an intention regarding Taiwan. So as China prepares for its geostrategic ambition, it had to adopt policies that Joseph basically said as inward-looking, and I could characterize as, using a German term, autarky. Okay, and end here.
Excellent. Thank you, Professor. Kunjitipa, if I may, also to have your view on this.
Okay. First of all, I think China is here in our region. Geographically, it cannot be moved. So regardless of its policy posture, China will be the most relevant partner, one of the most relevant partners for the future of ASEAN. I think that's number one. But since Xi Jinping's foreign policy, which I think we can conceptualize it through 3 R's, reassuring of peaceful rise, 2, reforming the world order, and 3, resisting others' meddling into its core interests. I think ASEAN and ASEAN members are fine with the first 2 R's, but not with the last R of resisting other meddling in its core interests. Military assertiveness, naval and port expansion, and economic tradecraft, the use of economic tradecraft are identified as key challenges for China-ASEAN relations. I think as China has encountered with 3 challenges right now. In order to be trustworthy partner of ASEAN, I think there are areas to improve, to name just a few. Okay, just 3 points. 1, I think its economy is stupid. It's a domestic crisis, economic crisis in China, and also internal political situation that Xi Jinping tried to consolidate power. It has moved inward looking approaches. That's the first challenge. The second one is that about the hegemonic goods substitution strategies that China tried to position itself as a provider of international public goods globally and regionally. The third challenge is about the core interest and more assertive behavior of China in the region. To name just a few, assertiveness in the South China Seas and maritime security, as Renato mentioned about 10-dash line, Taiwan, death trap diplomacy, wolf warrior diplomacy in social media and in diplomatic relations, soft power deficits. So I think this is the case. But last point, I think ASEAN needs to think what is the best way for ASEAN, whether we should have the pragmatic relations or pragmatic as a core fundamental driving force behind ASEAN diplomacy, or we should pursue a kind of value-based diplomacy. If the latter, it might be not compatible with China's, that China's trying to position itself as a more hegemonic power position in the region. through not only BRI, but also through 3Gs right now, GDI, GSI, and GCI, Global Development Initiatives, Global Security Initiative, and GCI. In one way or the other, it might be compatible with ASEAN way, with pluralistic international order, but I think it might not compatible with younger generation and also with a more democratic and inclusive ASEAN in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Chitipat. Another interesting color, but of course, as the administrator of this survey, perhaps you have your own view as well on this.
Yes, very short. I think why the respondents answer in such way is also because the respondents doesn't have the crystal ball, and the respondents also, not all of the respondents are having similar view on and similar background on understanding the economic trajectory of any country. So I think this is why this is a survey of perceptions, and perceptions is of course not necessarily reflect the reality. So while the experts probably understand and know that there are challenges in Chinese economy today and might affect its trajectory for the future, I think the dominant perceptions as indicated in the survey is still that China is still going to that direction, is still going to be more and more powerful in terms of economic and political influence, and people are expecting that change and preparing for that. That is why then it is acknowledged as the most relevant partner, most important partner in the future, but also at the same time creating concerns because it is getting bigger, it is getting more powerful, getting more influential to our life, but we are not sure what is this giant is going to do in this region. So that is why that's the opinion. But whether this opinion or this perception will come true, we don't know. But we see that perceptions in one way or another will affect how decision makers are making their decisions. So it will. It is also still important to understand this.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So I think the keyword here is the buzzword is the crystal ball, which no one has actually. But yeah, your result, the result of this survey may also lead us to that crystal ball, if any. Before we move to other two giants, let me remind everybody, participants here, those who wish to pose questions to our distinguished panelists, we have two microphones over there on the left and right side of yours. So please approach, and then perhaps we'll entertain your questions later. Perhaps later, before after we explore more about other two giants. Now let's move to India. What happened between our relationship with India? Because India topped none, in the survey in every aspect. For that, perhaps Dr. Sofwan, I'd like to invite you to make the first comment on this, and then
yes, it's interesting to see that India is generally less present. So when asked about which country is most influential in this aspect, there's no India. But I think it's quite how to say. This pretty much illustrating that our relationship so far, Southeast Asia, is pretty much directed towards the Pacific Ocean, right? Especially after the Second World War, the economic structure was pretty much developed by the winner of the Second World War, the United States, which developed the triangular relationship in which Japan, USA, and Southeast Asia is connected into this global economic relations. China later included when the rapprochement between US and China happened with Kissinger's help, right? A few. But I think that creates kind of path dependence because for decades your relationship is going towards the Pacific direction, Indian Ocean was seen as a backyard. Indian Ocean was seen as something that is not in the priority of these Southeast Asian countries for a long time. If we look, for example, if you are going to New Delhi from Jakarta, you have very few flights. You have to mostly go to Kuala Lumpur first, and after Kuala Lumpur or Singapore, you can connect to India. That shows that even Indonesia, which actually share the same route, right? Indonesia is like from the Indian archipelago, have some Indian part of it, and we have thousands years of relationship. If we want to go to India, it's very difficult. So I think it's quite reflective to the situation in which our relationship is very much directed to Pacific Ocean. This is changing, of course, but still, I think the picture is there.
Thank you. Well, in fact, Indonesia has been trying, as far as I'm concerned, when I was with the Minister of Foreign Affairs, we've been trying to pull India into our orbit through East Asia Summit or through...
And India is actually willing, right?
Yes, definitely, definitely. Why there is no trust? Professor Renato, please.
I had the chance to participate in 3 international conferences in India, almost consecutively. It has also something to do with India's priority. India's priority is primarily the sub-region, what they call the Indian Ocean region. So that accounts for the fact that India is kind of absent in Southeast Asia. So their primary focus, of course, is consolidating their leadership and, of course, the same time dealing with the ply in the ointment in the Indian Ocean region. It is no less than Pakistan. But, of course, the Indians are very much aware Pakistan is challenging China's agenda primarily because of China. So sooner or later, we will see greater Indian presence here because they would like to give China a dose of its medicine by coming into Southeast Asia. So it already started with the Philippines when we have, of course, acquired the BrahMos intermediate range missiles. You know, it basically pulled the armed force of the Philippines to the 21st century. Suddenly we have an intermediate, ballistic missile system, courtesy, of course, of India. And I think India is also thinking of offering it to Indonesia and to other Southeast Asian countries. So
Thank you.
this is basically part of India's effort to show its presence, and probably that survey might change in the next few years.
Exactly.
The more the merrier. That's the ASEAN
Of course,
motto.
definitely. And
The more the merrier.
yeah, but it's rather sad, right, to understand that the ASEAN-India relation is still or will continue to be the function of larger geopolitics factor.
That's the reality of the world.
And exactly. I mean, given the weight. But so far for India, Professor Leo, of course, I'd like to invite you to have comments on India.
Sure. I'll just add on to what Renato said. Actually, it will be an interesting idea. First, I agree that the Indian priorities is very much the subcontinent is China, it's the Indian Ocean. You remember a few years ago, Indonesia had a vision of a global maritime fulcrum. We don't really hear about it now, but it's interesting to revive it and see how to marry it with IORA, the Indian Ocean Rim Association, right? Although the interesting thing will be, India will want to be the center of it, and Indonesia will want to be the center of it. So your diplomacy, you have to go and talk it out. Okay, but in addition to that, I think another challenge in the case of India is that it is more ambitious now under Prime Minister Modi. But the question is how much actual power, material power it has to contribute. Yeah, it is still lagging behind the other 3 in your survey: the US, Japan, and China. Although it is trying to do things in pockets. Yeah, but one area, as we all know, that unfortunately it has been very difficult to work with India is trade. Right, which leads me to my third point about India and India's federal system, makes it very difficult for New Delhi to take the lead in policy. Yeah? So you have this interesting disconnect where you have a foreign service that is of very high quality, but very relatively poorly funded and resourced. Yeah? Whereas the different states have their own sort of agenda and strategies for outreach. And it is very difficult for the central government to bring everything together in a strategic way. Yeah, so I think this is another obstacle that India faces.
Thank you. Just one last point regarding India. I agree with Joseph, but India is actually a beneficiary to the US-China strategic competition.
Yes.
The coupling of US and the risking of US companies and other Western companies benefit China. As they withdraw from China, they're going to India.
Yeah.
So this has really given a boost to the Indian economy and also give really a lot of dynamism to their sense of self-confidence.
Yes, and I would agree with that, especially in the area of digital technology and all this.
So ASEAN
Yeah.
should welcome more. This is an ASEAN game. The more, the merrier. We prevent one dominant power from basically taking control of the region
Excellent.
by inviting in fact, all of them.
From crystal ball to the more the merrier. I think those are the two buzzwords. Professor Konjitipat, please.
Thank you. I think I agree with Joseph and Renato. I think if we think about different players in here, I think U.S. seem to be reluctant partner, in particular after post-Cold War world. Is trying to be less reluctant now. China should be more responsible power, but India, I think, has a key challenge about being a kind of a resident power in the region. So I think that's the crucial point for India. We know that it's a big market. Okay, the relevance of Indian Ocean play important role. So I think we incorporate it into the Indo-Pacific region, right? That we cannot ignore India. It's a big market. But the key point is about the familiarity of India, familiarity of India in our region. Okay, I think when I teach international relations, I ask my students to think about three things, 3 Ps: place, power, and people. Right?
Sure.
Place, I think India has key place, big market, location, power. India has material and military powers, of course, but I think India has what can we say, still a mixed issue with the mind, the empire of mind. Okay, so that we can see that public perception in ASEAN still have a mixed feeling, sometimes misunderstanding about India at some point, and we see that a shift from look east to act east is not quite promising from many ASEAN members. Think about India's absence from ASEP, okay? And you look at investment remain relatively smaller than other players and unknown. If you think about in the survey, India initiatives are less well known in the region compared with others, BRI or US-led FOIP, for example. And I think the last challenge is India's nationalist temptation, which is very challenging now. So my bottom line is that India is a potential power for ASEAN, but the key challenge is how to navigate India to become a kind of more resident power in ASEAN. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Konjitipat. Again, for those who would like to pose question, please approach the microphone over there. But I would like to pose the last question to our panelists. It's all about another giant, the United States. And of course, the survey unveils that the US does not secure the top position as the most trustworthy partner, a reasonable major power for ASEAN, or as a relevant partner for ASEAN's future. Instead, Southeast Asians perceive the US as the country most likely to politically intervene in the ASEAN matters, domestic internal affairs. How do you see this? And I would like to reverse the order to start with Konjitipat, if you'd like to respond to that, please.
Okay. For the US, I think a couple of factors that explain maybe why it is maybe the least relevant partner in ASEAN. I think one, maybe about historical legacy, that during the Cold War, US has been meddling with other countries, had supported some authoritarian regimes during the Cold War. So it play a kind of issue with, from many countries in the region. It might be seen as a hypocritical player in the region. Number two, I think it's about uncertainty in American security commitment to the region in the post-Cold War world. In other words, the U.S. was has seen as a reluctant and inconsistent partner in the region. I think it's been highlighted in the survey as well, and also it's compatible with ISIS survey, ISIS Singapore survey as well. The third point, I think the U.S. still think in terms of Cold War mentality with friend-enemy binary opposition. The main point for the U.S. Strategic posture in the region is to contain or constrain China. So it pushed a kind of choosing side mentality in the region in general. The fourth point, I think many countries in ASEAN perceive U.S. stance right now as kind of bypassing ASEAN centrality and instigating minilateralisms such as AUKUS and Quad. And in the survey, it's quite clear that AUKUS and Quad are seen not quite positively, okay, despite Quad is better than AUKUS. So you can see that AUKUS will undermine regional stability about 32.17%. Quad has been, seen quite equally between undermining regional stability and strengthening regional security at the same time. Last but not least, about economic commitment, I think the U.S. has not keen on developing a kind of comprehensive economic partnership with the region following, the removal from TPP, right? So IPEF, many people talk about Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, which I think is there, but it cannot replace the multilateral free trade schemes such as TPP. Yeah, so overall, I think all these five factors render U.S. as a quite reluctant partner, and the main focus of U.S. right now seems to be Sino or China focus in the region.
Thank you, Chitipap. Prof. Fernando, if I would like to invite you.
Well, I think the survey, in a way, recognizes the role that the United States has played in the region. Now, three basically. Number one, of course, the United States is an external power. It's not part of the region. It's out there, of course, it has concern, and the role played by the United States is primarily, you would use the term, a strategic offshore balancer. The role of the U.S. is not to dominate the region, is to prevent a dominant power from emerging. We know it because, they started with the Philippines. When they occupied the Philippines in 1898, that has been the role of the United States in playing the balancing role. Of course, initially against Russia, then later against Japan, Second World War, even during the Cold War. So it has always been out there. At this point in time, the role of the United States as a strategic offshore balancer is based on the fact that it needs access to the maritime commons in terms of the fact that it has a 7th Fleet operating, of course, in the region. It will not get involved. They learned their lesson during the Korean War and, of course, during the Vietnam War. So it's there. Plus, of course, the United States has external. It's a global power. It has other global concern. In a way, the region, Southeast Asian, recognizes, at this point in time, it plays a role of a balancer, strategic offshore balancer, but for how long? Yes. So it accounts for the fact there's already a growing skepticism that this will not last forever, which is actually very healthy. It provides ASEAN the need to rethink how should we basically ensure the security of the region if, the external power would not be there, and of course we have a neighbor that might have a hegemonic ambition. Finally, of course, in terms of the intervention, of course, the concern right now in terms of the intervention, if you have a major clash between the United States and China, first in the South China Sea and probably in Taiwan. So that's, it's there in a way. It's just like power there, an eagle, but we are concerned that if eagle would suddenly clash with the dragon.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. And Professor Liu, please.
Okay, I'll just make one point in addition to everything that they've said. Now, from your survey, it's quite clear in Southeast Asia, not many people love the US. Yeah, but in your marriage must be based on love. Do not base international relations on love. You will be disappointed. Yeah. So my one point is basically this: just imagine a Southeast Asia or Indo-Pacific for that matter, if the US decides that its interests are no longer served by being present in the region and it decides to withdraw from the region. Yeah.
Excellent, Professor. I fully agree with you. Pak Marty, my guru, always taught me that Pak Landry, sentiment is not policy. So I think that's something I dear hold to my heart. And of course, Pak Bana, please.
Yes, thank you very much. I'd like to second Professor Renato's comment on strategic offshore balance. I think the result of the survey pretty much illustrate that. In a more layman conceptual sense, it's like, we need you, but don't be too overwhelming here. I mean, please come, but don't be too dominant here. But of course, that's the expectation. However, it's difficult to find this right level of presence, right? That's why it's going up and down in both sides. And there is also a concern from Southeast Asians about the real commitment of the United States. Will, for example, the commitment to pivot here in East Asia, in Southeast Asia, be consistent when the government change after the elections? Now, for example, one of the most important initiatives by the United States, the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, offered to many Southeast Asian countries. We recently heard that there are backtrack on this progress of the IPEF because of the domestic issue in the United States. So while Southeast Asians see that the United States' presence is important, especially to balance China, they also see that we cannot really rely on, we cannot take that into granted. Yeah? We can take that for granted. It is something that is pretty much fluctuating, and in that sense, I think this is why ASEAN needs to be, rather than relying on external or offshore balance, it needs to have its own strategy in ensuring the stability in the region.
Thank you, panelists, all for exhaustive questions, but of course we have to entertain questions from the audience. Unfortunately, the organizers just informed me that we have only time until 1, although we started late. But please be brief in your questions and identify yourself, please.
Firstly, I'd like to say Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
So I'm representing myself as a Betawinis. Betawi means the original people of Jakarta. I'm Betawi people, and I'm representing my ancestor. My ancestor is a Chinese from Ulama, and I'm from University of Indonesia. My faculty is Technique.
Can you be brief with your questions directly, please?
All right. My question for all the professor here is, why don't we just, like India and China is a giant power. Like, why don't we ASEAN, Southeast ASEAN, just go along well with China and India? Although there's some problem we have with China and India, but why don't we just go along well? And we have to much reluctantly decline the United States offerings.
Sure.
That's just my
Thank you
for the professor. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And please, the second We got your message. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, all of the professors. My name is Friska, and I'm from University of Indonesia. I'm a professor. I'm a Dr. Sofwan student. Hello, Mas Sofwan. Okay, my question is addressed to Prof. Renato Cruz de Castro. You said before that what makes China chosen as the most relevant future partner compared to Japan, which is considered as a favorable partner because of China's maritime expansion. My simple question is, shouldn't it be because of China's maritime expansion in the South China Sea and such as 10 lines actually make ASEAN perspective on China as unquote is an enemy or hegemonic power which dominating Southeast Asia region beside as the most relevant for future partners? That is it. Thank you.
Thank you. Sensei, please, I know you have questions.
Yes. Thank you very much. I'm Kiya Masahiko. I'm the Japanese ambassador to ASEAN. First, thank you for a great appreciation to Japan, the outcome. I think that we appreciate all the ASEAN people for this outcome. But Japan will not take this for granted.
Yeah.
Japan will intend to redouble its efforts to further contribute to ASEAN, the region, and the world.
Big round of applause to Japan.
And so we are going to have later this month, from the 16th to 18th of this month, there will be an ASEAN-Japan commemorative summit commemorating the 50th anniversary of our relationship. So for that purpose, I'd like to ask you a question. Well, after 50 years, with these global challenges like climate change or pandemics or natural disasters or digitalization, and with continuing or ever intensifying geopolitical challenges,
Sure.
what role does ASEAN want Japan to play for the future now, the new role and new relationship for the ASEAN and for the world? I'd like to convey your answers back to Tokyo later this month for that event. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. That's a very important question. I'm sorry we were told that we can only have to entertain three questions. Sorry, three questions. So I'm so sorry because I live at the mercy of the organizers. And yeah, we all. So we have to finish before 1. But I think you may choose whichever questions, but I think the last question is very important about what do we want our partners to do. Please, Professor Cruz.
Let me address the question, Ambassador. Number one, of course, continue to live with the spirit of the Fukuda doctrine that Japan would not go back to the ways of militarization. But at the same time, there's also a need to look at the Fukuda doctrine in terms of what's happening in the 21st century. That, we cannot simply remove geopolitics from this equation, given the fact, of course, that the region is confronted by, of course, what I call the China challenge. So Japan will have to play a very constructive role that whatever changes would happen in the region, just in case the United States would withdraw from the region or China would become more assertive, Japan would always be there as a reliable partner of ASEAN. And this is something that, of course, the Philippines has, basically been taking advantage of right now. Thank you very much for your question, Ambassador.
Thank you. Anyone would like to also make one or 30-second comment?
I'll just make some comments. The first question on China, let me just point out 3 reasons why Southeast Asians are sometimes a bit apprehensive towards China. Yeah? The first, as Renato mentioned already, territorial claims, territorial disputes. China is locked in territorial disputes with Southeast Asian countries, the way that none of the other powers featured in the survey are, right? Number 2, call it economic coercion, economic leverage. Now, it's not unique to China. The Americans do it as well, but they call it sanctions. When the Chinese do it, sometimes we call it something else. But the fact of the matter is, because China has a lot of economic leverage over Southeast Asia for all the reasons we talked about earlier, how they use that leverage is being watched very carefully by countries in the region. That's the second. And third, probably in more cases, in some countries compared to other countries, China has sometimes used their ethnic Chinese links with different overseas Chinese communities to directly or indirectly influence politics, influence policy. Now, that is a very complex issue. We don't have time to get into that, but anyway, these are the three reasons. I think very quickly on Japan, I think Japan has played a very solid role in the last decade. I think starting with Abe-san, who really, I mean, how Japan rescued the TPP, right, is something that has been very much appreciated. And so the issue now is whether Japan can continue in certain areas to play that leadership role, you know, not just a supporting role, but a leadership role. In fact, on this issue of the sort of military past, if I may put it this way, I may differ a bit from my good friend Renato. I don't think Southeast Asians, over time especially, think too much about that. I don't think they think too much about that. It's very interesting. You look at how Singapore leaders have responded. 20 years ago, 20, 30 years ago, Singapore leaders in different ways were very concerned about Japan, this issue of rearming of Japan. Today, when Japan announced its plan to increase defense expenditure, no one made an issue of it. Everyone welcomed it. It was seen as a major strategic contribution to regional stability. Yeah? So not just supporting, but finding areas where Japan can lead is something that will help you maximize the goodwill that you see from the surveys.
Thank you, Professor. 30 seconds for you, Konjitipal, if possible.
Thank you. Two quick points. One, I think all major powers, including US, China, India, should look at the survey and look at the areas of cooperation and area of challenges that the survey has addressed. Okay, and I think that would be solve or address and solve the challenges together in the region. The second point, I think I'd like to answer Ambassador about what role Japan should do in the future. I think 2 points quite similar with these two professors here. I think one, stay in the region, okay, and continue working as economic reliable partners of ASEAN. And second, strengthening your role and position in the region, addressing new areas of cooperation, including climate change, Mekong, sub-regional cooperation, digital economy, and together with that, maybe we can lead together, okay, from the middle, leading from the middle. That I think ASEAN and also Indonesia, Thailand has played a role as a kind of middle powers in the region. I think this is largely because, not despite of ASEAN multiple identity, I think ASEAN is incomplete and ineffective sometimes, as the survey highlight. But I think ASEAN is indispensable, okay, for greater and constructive contribution to peace and security, prosperity in the region. I think another I is that ASEAN is inclusive. Okay, ASEAN is incomplete and ineffective sometimes, but it is indispensable. And at the same time, this is because ASEAN is inclusive, that we include everyone into this region and also the ASEAN-led regional security architecture. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Bana, Dr. Sofwan,
yeah,
please.
thank you very much.
Final words.
I think I agree with the answers, and it's already comprehensive. But I'd like to add some things. First, from the survey, we understand that most respondents, so Southeast Asians, tend to see these partners not in the great power rivalry lens. They do not want Asian to be sucked into this great power rivalry. So I think what we do expect for these great powers, first, is to think beyond their rivalry with other great powers. that international politics, while structural pressures is there are possibilities, there are creative possibilities beyond great power rivalry, and that non-great powers must also be heard, that people in the region must also have their own agencies and room for maneuvers. Second, I think it is also the expectation that these great powers is expected to uphold the ASEAN centrality in terms of ASEAN normative centrality and ASEAN institutional centrality. While this is of course challenging because it takes two to tango, and ASEAN needs to prove that it is able to provide the framework for ASEAN centrality in a more concrete way, but we generally think that ASEAN still the most cost-effective way to manage the great power rivalry, and it is for the best interest of not only ASEAN but also these great powers. Third, maybe very specific to Japan, is many concerns about Japan. Japan is viewed positively as the provider of quality infrastructure development, but one little concern is the reluctance of Japan for knowledge transfer. I think, I mean, when comparing Japan and Chinese projects, while China may be only saying it, but there are concerns about Japanese reluctance for this technology transfer, which is quite crucial for countries like Indonesia, who is trying so much for transforming into more value-added economy. So I think if you could do something about that, that would be probably very important. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. On that note, actually, this topic is very, very important, very interesting, but unfortunately, you know, the time is very limited. Let me conclude by, referring you to the movie Lord of the Rings, if you still remember. I think ASEAN has been a good hobbit in that movie, where we are non-threatening, we have non-threatening posture, but trusted by everyone. But now through this survey, we understand that we need to measure to which, partners that we must put our trust most and least, and so forth. But this is very important. Big round of applause to our panelists and to you all. Thank you very much for attending and for your attention. My apology for those who haven't been able to pose questions here, but we continued the dialogue during meals and etc. Thank you very much. Please.
It is the hobbit that throw the ring.
Thank you. This is the hobbit that throw the ring. So everybody expect us a lot. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for moderating the session, Pak Landry. And now I invite everyone of the panelists to the center of the stage for a photo session, along with the President of AREA, Tetsuya Watanabe, and also my colleague, Calvin Ko, who is the Director of FPCI Research and Analysis and Coordinator of FPCI Survey Program, to hand over a token of our appreciation to the speakers.